online. So apparently now, if we look at this channel, I think it takes a bit longer for it to show up, but it says online. Before it was just saying sending. So this is a lot better already. Okay, let's connect the account again. Because by the looks of it, connecting the account allows me to set the channel title from Restream, which is my preferred. See, sending data, that's what it said all the time before. Now it says online, and if I go to update titles, I can change the title. The title has changed. And if I go to my channel now, how do I know if I'm streaming? My videos. Maybe it's showing up under according to, so here's my Restream chat going on over here. According to this sound here, I'm currently streaming to 3 places. I open that. There we go. So this is live, studio maintenance, just hanging out. Alright, so theoretically now, if you're watching this on YouTube, you should be able to chat with me. Let me know if you're watching this on YouTube. Right. So if you are watching this on YouTube, you missed the first part of this, which was me setting up my green screen, redoing some OBS scenes, getting my lighting a bit better. So now I'm going to have a look at my URL shortener that I was working on. And I can't actually remember where I got up to this. So I'm just going to start everything up and see what's working. So let's go into URL Shortener API. In another tab, we'll go to URL Shortener Dashboard. And in another tab, we'll go to URL Shortener Redirector. Start code for each of these. Alright, so over here we have our redirector. That's the API. We've got a very slow. Alright, here's the redirector, here's the API. Dashboard. I accidentally closed it. And the dashboard. Alright, so we'll start the Gatsby app, which is the dashboard. The redirector is a now app, so we're just going to run now locally. And the API is also now, so we'll just run now locally. So I think, just have a look at the end files off screen. So the URL Shortener was on port 3000. Is that where I'm running it? The actual redirector is... No, I want to run now dev. This is pushed it into staging. Alright, so 3000 and 3001 for the API. Yep, so the API connects to Fauna, pulls the information out. So let's have a look on the dashboard. Something's already running on port 8000. It's running on port 8000. The login challenge. Why is that still running? Where are you running? Show yourself. Over here. Close you down. You can go away. So I should also what's going down there? This authenticated isn't working. Let's open new. Oh yeah, that's the URL Shortener. I do need to install what was it? Now API? Something. Gatsby CLI. I've run out of coffee, so I'm going to have to drink my water. So anyway, where I'll drink it. Alright, you can go away. So we've got our shortener here, we've got home, got dashboard. I think I was working on authentication. So callback was broken because I was using test. I probably shouldn't use that one. Let's log in. Who am I logged into? Ben Test. Let me log out and log in. With another one. Probably. This one. Wrong email. This one. Alright, I don't remember my password. Thanks. Where can I find you? Over here. Well, I can't use that one because you can see it. It gives me a new one each time. Alright, let's do that off screen. Update auth0benedectwriter.com. Yes, please. Update. auth0benedectwriter.com. Well, that was harder than it should have been. Password managers are great, apparently. Right, so I don't know, I can't switch tenants. Alright, so I want to create a new tenant, and this one is going to be for URL Shortener. Shortener. Is that available? URL Shortener. It exists already. URL -Shortener. Perfect. Right, applications. New application, single page app. I think this name shows up when you log in. Let's go with it anyway, we can always change it later. So over here in the dashboard, I'm just going to double check my inf doesn't have any. There's nothing sensitive in there. So we've got a pointer to the API, which is running locally on 3000. The domain is now this one. Client ID is this one. And we want the callback to go to the dashboard and the logout to be to the home page. Save that because it's an environment variable, we need to restart the service. Is authenticated as assigned a value but never used. Alright, so the other thing is that I did this probably a couple of weeks ago, and there's how many changes I've made. There's somebody at Auth0 has come up with a or I don't know whether they were at Auth0. I saw it on the internal Slack. They there's like a bootstrap script that'll get Auth0 working really easily with Gatsby now. I wonder whether I should just give that a try. Let's have a look to see how much I've done to the dashboard. So here are the changes I've made. So that I copied in, that I copied in, that I did. That's just that. That's what I installed. Created those files. And I put a router around the dashboard. I had a router that was returning these things, and then I wrapped it in protected root. I reckon I'm going to throw all of this out and we're going to start with Auth0 integration again. Right, let's see if I can find that thread. So this is the thread that we were discussing internally. It's publicly accessible on the Auth0 Spa.js library. So the issue is that the new Spa.js library uses web workers to avoid, so the way that we used to do transparent authentication before re-authentication, the way that you can get a token if you open a new tab or you restore a session, is there can't be, you can't store tokens in your cookies in a single page app because it's not secure. So, but there is a session cookie between your customer's logged in user, I mean your customer's login, and the Auth0 tenant that you use. And we used to open an iframe, stick it out of view, and get the tokens that way because the iframe would send the cookie. For anti-tracking and privacy protecting reasons, a lot of browsers nowadays are not sending third-party cookies at all, maybe, especially in iframes, which breaks the way a lot of the identity industry were helping your users log in automatically, persisting that state between tabs, that kind of thing. So we redid it so that we can now use refresh tokens, and those refresh tokens use web workers to pull new tokens through. So for the first time in a long time, well, I think you could have done it before, hacked it in maybe, is refresh tokens were generally not used in the front end. Nowadays you can, as of like a week or two ago. So the latest Auth0 Spa.js library now supports web workers. Web workers, there's an object called a blob, and that exists in browsers, but it doesn't exist in Node because there's no web worker or a blob object in a JavaScript server. So when you're building Gatsby, it uses Node to build a whole lot of static pages, and Node doesn't have a blob, therefore it fails because web worker is using a blob. Yeah. So the way I got around it, my friend, colleague Sam Julian sent me some code that I basically put in to disable pulling in the Auth0 library at all if Webpack was doing a build, because for the build process you don't need the Auth0 module, you only need it when running in the browser later on. So testimonial, you created a new Auth0 Gatsby site. Let's find out where that is. That should be in GitHub. Auth0 block. It's going to be in somewhere in Gatsby. Gatsby.js maybe. They have their samples. There's the starter hello world. I wonder whether it's in here. No. Let's just search all of GitHub for that. There it is. Oh no, it's not Gatsby Auth0. When was this published? A year ago. So it's not this one. Let's just go with it. Let's first thing I want to do is that's the dashboard. I want to remove all of those changes. I want to get rid of this. Status done. And if we look at git k, we've got initial commit, and then I added a motion core, no other changes. Great. So we can now, there's another thing that I saw. This one. Go to Gatsby.js recipe to automate the setup of authentication with Auth0 by walking through creating a local plugin. Walk through these steps, create an app on Auth0, and it just works. Alright, let me just mute pretzel. Make sure my sound settings going through HDMI, unmute, Bigify, play. Is there no audio? Doesn't look like it. All right, let's go to the beginning. So what's going on? Gatsby recipes running that recipe. First step is installing the SDK, so it's installing the resolutions. Oh, there we go. Let's just come in. Step 2, boilerplate code. Press enter to continue. It's creating some code. Looks like it does it all automatically. Puts in a plugin. I reckon we just run this and see what happens. Halfway through. So I'll update that manually. As Gatsby config. That's a little bit nice. All right, so show the thread. Does he link us to it anyway? If you're interested in the code, you can check it on this gist. So there's gist or gist or whatever you want to call it, or what's your recipe? Is that the same link as this one here? Let's open it anyway, see what's going on. That's the Auth0 recipe MDX. Okay. So the command is Gatsby recipes and then the URL, and that's it. I've never played with Gatsby recipes before. Let's give it a try. So we're in dashboard. Gatsby recipes. This one here. Do your thing. All right, thank you for trying experiment version of Gatsby recipes. Ask questions. No. Add authentication. All the pieces of authentication are possible in Gatsby. Thanks to all CRF setting up doesn't have to be cumbersome. This set up comes straight from the official quick start, which to be honest, pretty good, eh? Proposed changes. The latest version of package has an issue during builds that is tracked. Okay, so we're going to a previous version. Interesting. Is that it? How do I get to the other steps? What's changed? You know what it is? It's probably because I've still got... No, it wasn't in there because I did a git checkout. I'm going to stop Gatsby over here. Let's run that again. Enter. This one is issues during builds and is being tracked. Okay. Press enter again and it ends. What's going on? Maybe recipes don't work very well on Ubuntu. Hey Justin, how you doing? I'm currently trying to get Gatsby recipes working because some funky guy, Kyle Gill, wrote this recipe to automatically integrate Auth0 with Gatsby. But it's not working. I'm running Ubuntu, and I wonder whether maybe that's a thing. Just going through to see if anybody here has had any issues. Doesn't look like it. Where are you from, Justin? Nah, it's not working for me. So I'm going to follow a different process, which is essentially what I just undid. But hey, we can go through it again. Isolation training you've been doing for years. I know, right? I've have to be honest, I've not been affected that greatly. I used to joke that the only reason I left home was to go to the airport. And with them shut down now, I've got no reason to leave home. Anyway, working from home has been fine. Yeah. In a way, I think actually it's... I don't know how to describe it. I've always had an ability to get work-life balance right. I've never been overly stressed. Felt like I've had to work harder. I certainly don't feel like that. Auth0 has been really supportive, no matter which area of the organization you're in. But you know, even though I worked from home before, I'm now finding that I'm working even more flexible hours. I think it was because, especially 4 or 5 weeks ago, when there was that crazy shopping panic buying at grocery stores, and I thought, you know what, if 9 a.m. is the best time for me to go shopping, I'll just go shopping at 9 a.m. Make sure we got food in the pantry. But it seems to have settled down again now, eh? Everything's kind of back to normal. I mean, still can't go out, can't be in parties of more than however many people. But I managed to buy some antibacterial, whatchamacallit, today. Wipes and gels and all sorts. So that's coming back. Got a message from the local grocery store that they've lifted the cap on how many toilet rolls you can buy. I never thought that would be a story we'd be waiting for. So, Justin, are you the Justin that I know? I know a Justin P. Is it the same one? Pasta and toilet paper. I know, I miss pasta. It's good to see you. My wife doesn't do grains or wheat as much as possible. And I bloody love pesto. It's one of my favorite dishes. Creamy cheese sauce over tomato. Anybody who says any different is wrong, including my wife. Yeah. Oh, it's been ages. It's even though it's a one-way voice conversation, it's good to see you. Which Rick G or Rick M? Probably Rick G, I'm guessing. We should. In fact, if you're not up to anything at the moment, I can always invite you onto the Twitch stream. Could be a bit of a laugh. Let me know if you want to. Then we can actually chat voice to voice. Is still working? Fair enough. Can't get away with having a cough. Yeah, working so hard you've got time to watch my stream. Oh dear. Well, I don't know if you've seen any of what I've been doing recently, but I had a URL. I used to use URLs, the PHP-based URL Shortener, and it was the last thing that I was running on a server. One of the final servers that I was managing myself, and I wanted to get rid of it. So I wrote my own URL Shortener using just vanilla JavaScript, hosting it on Zeit and hosting the data in... This is horrible. I mean, JSON store isn't horrible, but the idea of using this as a production-ish data store is terrible. So basically, you get this endpoint, and you can push, you can post, put, and delete, and get, and whatever to this endpoint and store anything you want in it. So I was storing lots of JSON blobs, and it was all right. But JSON store went down at one point. It's a free product. I didn't expect it to have any kind of uptime. But I've moved to Fauna now. Fauna.com, I think, or is it faunadb.com? Yeah, which I'm loving. So it's like, I've always hated setting up yet another database in the server. You do have to stay on the pulse of new ideas. And if you hadn't heard, if you had heard of Fauna before, just pretend you hadn't. And you're learning something new about storing data in the cloud. So with the project that I'm working on at Auth0, we've got a whole lot of vendors that have been pre-qualified, and Amazon AWS is obviously one of them. So I've been playing with Dynamo, and I don't like it. I mean, it's good, but one of the issues that I personally have with a lot of the AWS suite of products is there's so many of them, and Amazon have to design them to be standalone as well as work together. So just the pipeline of joining these things together, getting a Lambda function to talk to Dynamo, it should be like click of a button, but it isn't. Fauna are integrated directly into, well, not directly, but they've got a good integration with Zeit, which is one of my preferred cloud hosting providers. I've been using Netlify a bit as well, but I started with Zeit, who are now Vercel. Apparently. I was at this website not long ago, and that's new. 21 million in funding. Well, they're obviously going places. But yeah, they've got integration now with Fauna. So I can basically write some code. Trying to get Lambda to talk to Dynamo and RDSDB at the same time. Jeez, mate. Got to reevaluate your life choices at some point, don't you? Yeah, anyway, so I've got, let's see if I'm actually logged in. I'm not, but, and for some reason, I don't have one password in this browser. Yes, indeed. Have you seen Fauna before? So, I did a talk the other day about Jamstack stuff, so I just created this demo database. I didn't realize it before I created these two, but Fauna actually allow you to nest databases. So you can come in and you can create a new child database, which then gets contained within the parent database. So that's kind of cool. I like that. What I should have done is created the URL Shortener database, and inside it had a dev database that I can use for local development. But essentially, it's like a document store. So I've got a whole load of redirects in here that have when it loads, a shortcode. So if you go to ben.cs/Twitter, it'll redirect you to this URL. And you basically just push and pull from this using Fauna query language, FQL. They also have GraphQL, native GraphQL capabilities. You can define your own GraphQL schema, import it, and then immediately a GraphQL endpoint becomes available. I haven't played with that too much, but that's my next step. But essentially, if we jump into the redirector and we look in here, so this, I've got 3 apps. One of them is the redirector, and basically that does, if you hit that site, whatever comes after the slash, after the domain, that's what it takes as the slug, and it does a redirect. That's all this app does. So it'll get, so the data comes in, you've got the short code. If we look at the routing, it basically says any request at all that comes in, send it off to the redirect.js. So when this comes in, we click info, redirect, this is the one we want. So we get the user request. From the user request, we get the URL of the actual request, and then we replace all of the slashes because we don't want any slashes at the beginning and the end. If nothing comes through, if you just go to the domain root, it'll return default. This allows me to have ben.sc redirect something. And then you create a Fauna client. And then, so this is now using the client FQL. You want to look at the reference, which is, you have to use indexes. So it creates indexes to look up. You've got your databases, but any queries that you make have to be made against an index. So I've got an index called redirect. If we jump over here to dev, indexes, I've got one for all the clicks. So I'm tracking clicks as well, all the redirects, and then a particular redirect where you can pass in a string and say, if somebody went to ben.sc/auth0, where would it take you? Well, nowhere. But if you go to /Twitter, then, so it allows you to pull one out. All redirects just gives you all redirects. So for the redirect, I pass in the shortcode as the lookup. And if there's a match, then I paginate. Paginate is basically the way that FQL says, get me a set of results. The default is, give me one single page with everything. And then I want you to make that query. And the response from that then allows you to, it gives you basically a list of references. And then you've got to dereference those and turn it into actual data. Long story short, at the end of it, I then get this redirect info. Yeah. So redirect info, which is an array of responses. There's only going to be one if there are any, which is the one result. And then I just do a redirect here to the destination. And that's it. That's the entire code for the redirect part of it. And it connects to FaunaDB. Everything gets stored in there. So that made my life much easier. It was actually a lot easier to use JSONbox because that is basically totally REST-based. And I basically just used fetch. And I would fetch using get to get the redirect, using post to store a click. So from a simplicity of development, that was faster. But the API that Fauna provide in their package is really nice. So that's the redirector. Then I've got an API, and the API allows you to so you can get all redirects, you can get a redirect, you can post or create a new redirect, you can put, which is updating a redirect, and you can get clicks. And this API is used purely, I mean, you could use it at the command line or with any system you want, but I also have this dashboard, which is what I'm currently running on. So the other two are vanilla JavaScript Zeit hosted applications. So they use Now, which is Zeit's command line interface for running a local development environment and pushing into production and that kind of thing. This I'm actually running a Gatsby site, which I'll also be hosting on Zeit. And I don't know if you've played with Gatsby, but it's a little more complicated than a standard React app in that there's a whole build process. So I've got to the point now where I don't think I've made any changes, so this should work. If I open this up and go back to the home page while it builds in the background. Taking a while. So what are you working on at the moment, Justin? Anything exciting? Why are you not working? So I'm making a request to get a list of all the redirects. Network attempt. Is it still running? Running at localhost port 3000. Not found. And if I get redirects, not found. Why not found? A bus replacement management system. Okay, my question was going to be, do you mean like a system data bus or a public transport bus? Public transport bus for situations where a train needs to be shut down for crossing works and that sort of thing. Are the crossing works still going on, or is this just general in the future if there is a crossing work? That's been, like, I thought it was supposed to be finished years ago, but I still keep hearing people talking about train line closures due to crossing works. Is there any public transport works that has ever been undertaken that's run to time? I don't know. Not in Melbourne. Well, that sounds interesting. So you're working on the scheduling of the buses? Are you doing a traveling salesman problem? Work out how the bus can get to everyone. That'd be fun. So I should be able to call. Oh, I'm losing myself. Dashboard, redirector, API. Stuff like when a train breaks down. Like a detection notification type system. This is running on the wrong port. So I need to start this one first before the redirector. Actually, I don't need the redirector running at the moment. I'll just start this one. Port 3000. So the URL Shortener is, the API is running on port 3000, and the dashboard is talking to the Shortener API on port 3000. So that's what the issue was. So it's running on the wrong port number. So now, if I refresh this page, there we go. So it's pulled in all the shortcodes from the dev Fauna instance via the API. So we've got our call down here to port 3000 redirects, and the response comes back with basically the JSON response of all of this. I can create a new shortcode, which should then appear in the list automatically. There it is. I can come in, I can edit it. It makes another call down here to get the destination to then fill in this value here, so that if it's changed anywhere else, it's always up to date. Make a change to that one. It should just say done. There, updated 876543. 876. So this is all working, but none of this is currently authenticated. The other thing that I haven't done is I haven't put in delete. A lot of noise in here. There won't be in the production database. I mean, there might be. But I I'm still not sure, and I don't know whether you've got any opinions about this, Justin, but I'm not sure whether or not to offer a delete or maybe an archive to clean up the noise. But theoretically, like there's the whole URLs should never change thing. Should always point to maybe the most recent content, which is why you can change the destination. But if I've ever linked to, I don't know, /YouTube, I don't want to delete that. What I could do, actually, is if clicks is 0, if nobody's ever followed it, then I can allow a delete. So that if I create one accidentally. But once it's been clicked once, should it be locked in forever? But yeah, we need authentication because at the moment anybody can hit, if I made this public, anybody can hit it and make changes. So home is a publicly available endpoint, dashboard, everything inside here should be password protected. So what I had been using was NW Richmond's Gatsby Auth 0 example. So let me just get up some notes that I made for another site that I worked on. Right, so jumping back into the code, let's stop this, and I want to install Auth 0 single page app JavaScript. That'll do. The operator can just put a call out to the bus operator to fulfill the needed buses to replace the trains. That's pretty cool. So there's a technical solution to that. It's not a physical phone call, or what's going on there? That looks fine. I had just created a new application over here, URL Shortener, N ending in Y, N ending in Y, so these are all correct and set up. One thing I do want to do here is set the callback URL to be the dashboard. Logout URL is the home page, and allowed web origins is just the domain. Set of URLs that are valid to redirect to. Allowed origins here. So the origin doesn't have a slash at the end. This one can, because I want the URL is the home page. I think those three settings should do. Save that. Right. They fill in the forms, track the data, a driver app that can handle geofencing. The reporting's fun or the geofencing's fun? Or a bit of both? Yeah, it sounds like a good tool, especially if you can put in that tracking. I think that's often one of the things that applications bring us, is that ability to understand more about what's happening when. Because manual processes can often go undocumented and forgotten. Right, so I need to update. I remember how I did this now. Slowly coming back to me. I kind of cheated. So let's just grab a terminal. And I have in here somewhere a checked out version of the Gatsby Auth 0 Spar example, which is this one here by NW Richmond. And then in here, I just went into git k and I looked at the diff. So here are the changes that I want to make to my local application. So we'll get the, not the redirector, we'll get the dashboard, stick that on this side here. All right, so end files excluded, adding the SDK. We just did that with npm down here. The example file. So we've got domain, client ID, callback, and logout. Client ID callback, he adds logout later on. Client only routes. So in Gatsby node, we basically want to copy this in. Let's just make that smaller. And I want to remove these. I don't need that comment. And I can get rid of all of that. The client route that I want to protect is dashboard. So basically this is going to go through, and when it finds any requests for /dashboard, it's going to rewrite. So that start with /dashboard, it's going to rewrite the path to dashboard/star, which then means that redirector can handle this. He adds redirector, which I think we have already. Redirector's in there. He also adds some styling stuff and React Helmet, which we probably already have. Yeah. Custom hooks. All right, a couple of extra files he adds. So we've got a wrapper here. We're basically using, where does this go? Components, auth. Auth0 wrapper.js. Let's just copy all of this in. Remove the pluses. So basically what this part is doing is, this is where we load the Spar.js. We're creating a context and a provider. So my understanding is that a context is basically a place to store information for the duration of a single page app. So a single page app is obviously loaded once and then content gets changed out as you go through. But each component has its own context of information. And traditionally, if you wanted, say for example, you've got a page that uses a layout, and that page then has the layout wrap itself around a load of other components, which might include, let's have a look at dashboard. So here we've got the layout, inside we've got the router and the dashboard. Now say for example up here, instead of just returning something, we turn this into a function, we defined some kind of variable at this point here, and we wanted that to go into, I don't know, let's say there's something inside edit. Edit returns anything interesting? Not really. Oh, let's keep that. What just happened? I changed the page. Oh, there it is. Yeah, but if the dashboard component had components inside it, which had components inside it, and that component needed that information that we just defined, we'd have to chain it down, pass it through every single component. Every component would have to know what to expect from the parent in order to pass it on to the child. What a context allows you to do is define one context of information that can be passed around the application. And then what the provider is information. So the context is the information, and a provider provides the information to a, yeah, I know, right? when your IDE wants to save. What did I change? I knew that I changed something, but I didn't want to save it. I also thought I changed another file, which is what really threw me. But there we go. So we'll come to the provider in a second. The provider is let me do the next step, and I might remind myself what the hell it does. I'm learning as we go along here as well. It's so much fun. So it's just that one file here. Configure the env environment. So within Gatsby config, I think Gatsby config I already have. No, I don't. So up here, I'm going to, he defines the active environment and works it all out and then passes that in. I'm actually going to be lazy and just use the defaults and say I want .env to just load my .env file. I don't need to change any of the metadata. I'm not using styled components. So this is where some of the fun comes in. So in the browser, Gatsby browser, so this gets run when Gatsby, as part of the build process for Gatsby, it allows you to do things actually, is this part of the build process? I imagine it would be. Oh, I forgot to hold down Alt. This allows us to do things like wrapping the root element. So the way that React works is you've got one root element, and then the JavaScript framework basically modifies what goes on inside that element. In order to get information in to all components that ever get rendered, we pass them into the root element. We can't change the root element because all of the components get rendered inside it, but this allows you to wrap the root element with another element. So the root element here is represented by element, which is passed in to this function, and we're going to wrap it with a provider. And the provider is going to get information out of our environment that we just loaded up through this line here in the config. So in process.env, we've now got the domain, the client ID, and the callback. I'm just going to make sure those have the same. Where did the env file go? Domain, client ID, callback URL. Domain, client ID, callback URL. I know that his code differs in two different places, logout URL. I just need to make sure that they work the same, that they're actually updated. Part of this is already prefixed. My env is the anyway, I'm waffling. So this information is now the Auth0 provider component is passed this information. So this provider here now has all the information it needs to be able to create the Auth0 client object in the first place, to handle a redirect callback, work out if the user is authenticated. Further down, it can do things like launch a login with a pop-up rather than a redirect. So this provider now provides all the functionality you need to interact with the Auth0 library, and it has the configuration that's been passed in through here. But because it's wrapped around the root element, every component now has the ability to use the Auth0 provider, which is really powerful. One of the added benefits that this gives is that traditionally when you do a callback, when you do any kind of login with a single page app, or even with the server browser architecture, you'll have a callback where an auth code is sent back to the application to be able to then request the tokens. Traditionally, you'd have to create your own dedicated callback URL that would then handle that callback and then redirect you to wherever you were before. Because the functionality is wrapped around the root element, and essentially a React app is single page, any single URL that you call on that application, as long as it's handled by React, like an image obviously is not going to work, will be able to handle the callback. So that's why when I configure the callback URL over here in Auth0, often you would have the callback URL would be something like callback, because that one URL would handle the callback. I'm redirecting it back to dashboard because that's where I want the user to be, and I know that the dashboard can also handle the callback. Waffling. I waffle a lot. Right, what's next? Yeah, it's really powerful, isn't it? When I first went through this code, and like I say, I'm pretty new to Gatsby. I've done React a little. I actually prefer, I don't know why, I find Gatsby easier to use than React, even though it's based on it. But when I read through this first, it took me a few, like a day or so, just to read through it and work out. Waffling is a great skill for a streamer. I've got no problems, mate. This will be my full-time job in no time in that case. Yeah, when I read through this and I finally worked out what the hell I was doing, I just had one of the brain explosion moments. Like, wow, that is so cool. There are some things that I see people do, just in terms of the way they... I love the fact that one feature or one problem can be solved in so many different ways. And sometimes you see the way somebody's done it and it's so elegant. Like, you start getting heart palpitations just looking at the code. Maybe it's just me. I forgot down here. So the other thing we need to do is SSR. I can't remember what it stands for. It's the static site something. This also is used static server-side rendering, not static site. I was wrong on all fronts. We want the same thing when we do any kind of server-side rendering. We want the same thing to happen. We want that auth0 component to be wrapped around it. So what we could do is just duplicate this code, but even more elegant is just exporting the wraproot element function from here, which we've exported from Gatsby browser. That's like the best copy and paste ever, isn't it? I still remember in PHP world, you just do an include, but I don't know, includes give me shivers, mostly because of that virus that I wrote. But this is, again, elegant, so pretty. Right, add in component to wrap. So we now have this, let's create that. So auth protected root.js, auth protected root.js with a hyphen. So what does this one do? We're using auth0 from the auth0 wrapper. So that's the file we were looking at before. Now we need to pull that in because auth0 is a function that we can use. The code up in here that wraps it allows every element to have access to the provider. Server-side rendering. I just had a flashback to the first time I worked with a host that allowed server-side includes in Perl. I'm struggling to remember the last time I worked with a host and I was even using Perl. They were good memories. I loved Perl. I love having also moved on from Perl. Yeah. Do you remember server-side includes in HTML? HTML-S, I think it was. Was it HTML server-side or something like that? Around 99. Yeah, that's when I first entered the workforce. I started with Visual Basic ASP, like the precursor to, no, VB ASP. Yeah, that is Visual Basic ASP. Precursor to .NET and all of those. And I think it was a couple of years after that I wrote my last Perl hosted project, which was mainly because I had a client that wanted a website that he could upload CSV files and it would generate the website for him. So I wrote a Perl system, which is really powerful, all the data stuff to pull everything into a MySQL database, and then PHP website that rendered information from the database. So that was pretty cool. Certainly used the strengths of Perl, but I've really not had a reason for that. Have you used it again since then? So protected root is a component that we can wrap around things. Use auth0 is something that comes out of this auth0 wrapper, which basically gives you the context. And the context is the provider, and the provider has functions like, or values like is authenticated, the user, whether or not things are loading. So let's close some of these off. I don't need all of these open anymore. So by invoking this method function, so this is the function that's returned, by actually invoking it, we get a number of things returned, and we're cherry picking what we want to get pulled out of that. We want to know whether or not the module is loading. We want to know whether or not the person is authenticated, and we want a handle to the function that allows you to log in with a redirect. Only half cool thing I did with Perl was I had a web form for printer. So clients could choose a background, colors, and enter some text, and they created a Coral Draw script to create the file ready for printing. That's pretty cool. The Coral Draw script, was that that's a script that you then run into Coral Draw and it would automate the creation of the file, or was it more like SVG where the file itself is already pretty much text of sorts? Use effect here is, long story short, the printer would load the script and run it. That's cool. I love the fact that older applications would allow you to run scripts into them. Yeah, macros. You don't get that nowadays so much. Well, not that I know anyway. Not that I've noticed. Back with React, when everything was quite class-based, you would have, obviously you've got your constructor, and there were a couple of things that would run. There was one method called will load after, will something after load. I don't know. It's basically like a function that runs directly after the component is loaded, and there was another one that would run directly after it was, or just before it was unloaded. You would need to turn this whole, so this is basically a function-based component. You'd have to turn it into a class-based component. And React as a whole, Gatsby React, is moving away from class-based components. In order to replicate that, useEffect basically is a method that gets called when things change, I think is the simplest way to describe it. And also my understanding is quite simple at the moment. So basically useEffect will call this function here when any of these things change. Now this is cool because we want to monitor when loading is authenticated and logging with redirect will change, because they'll come through from the useAuth0, but is authenticated can change, for example, and we want to know that. Now if you pass through an empty array, it would only load once the first time the component is loaded. There's a really good way of getting one-time data into a component. If you didn't pass a parameter in at all, then useEffect is run every single time a render change happens, which is often. So I recommend against that. But this is a really cool way of saying, like, anytime that any of these values here change, and they can change because it's single page and there's components relying on other components, they could be changed in any other component and that'll flow through. We're basically saying if any of these change, we want to find out if the user is, if it's loading or if the user is authenticated. Otherwise, we're going to call async login, which is this asynchronous function that we've defined, which will basically wait until a login with redirect has happened. So this allows us to wrap the protected root component around any other components, and the stuff inside won't be rendered until we know whether or not they're allowed to see the content. In a nutshell. Minor changes due to linting. I don't care about those. Remove unneeded pages. Create navigation bar component. So it's got some just links down here. I don't need those links. I've already got a navigation bar in my application. So is that from Gatsby or React? The way you're passing in the loading is author. So that's happening in React because the auth0 library isn't actually running. Gatsby is, the way I think of it is Gatsby is basically a single or a static site generator for React apps that is based on React, if that makes sense. So one of the benefits is that you can run npm install to bring in a whole lot of libraries that you need both for the build time and the runtime, where build time is Gatsby and the building and runtime is the React app. The downside is that, as we'll probably discover soon, when I try and build the Gatsby app, because I've got the Auth0 plugin loaded, and the Auth0 plugin assumes it's running in a browser. When Gatsby runs the code through Node, it fails because it's not a browser. We'll come to that in a second. But it does mean that you get that both powerful and also sometimes confusing situation where code can do both the building and the runtime rendering. But yeah, all of this is basically running in the browser. Anything we're looking at now to do with Auth0 will only happen in the browser. Right, so then we have, what's he done over here? Minor changes due to linting, more linting and minor changes, explain the purposes, create an about page. I don't want one of those. Modify content in the landing page. Again, that's just the home page he's changed. Create a protected client only. So client only routes and I don't know what the opposite would be. Server, maybe. So within React, we've got, I don't know whether I've got any in this application. Okay, so this here, these are routes that Gatsby is using to know what pages to create. So they're like server-side or render-based routes. You can also have client-based routes, which are routes that only get executed once you're running in React. And those will be the, like, I went to dashboard/insert name of slug for URL shortcode, which Gatsby doesn't know about, but React will, because it'll use the API. So what he's saying at this point here is we're going to create a client-only route. So he's created this this button element, which is basically styling a button. I don't care about that. He's created accounts.js pages, which is what he was protecting originally. I think if we look down one of the early files here, the client routes that we were protecting is account. So if we come back up here, account. So this is the account page. I've already got the dashboard page, because that's what we were looking at before. So I basically want to change this so that it's got a so that it is a protected route. So you'll see here he's got protected route inside layout. So I'm just going to put that in here, and I'm going to type it because then I can use VS Code's fancy auto import. So I run that, and then close that off. So now we can see that at the top of the file it's automatically pulled that in for me, which is cool. And protect route, and then inside that he's got all this information. Then he's got the router and the locations he wants to go to. So I think that should be enough. So basically now this router should only do anything if I'm authenticated, I think. We do need to pull in. Do we need to pull this in? Oh, so he's got a logout button here. So logout is authenticated in user. So he's using logout. He's authenticated and user. So he's basically saying if the user's logged in, then JSON dump the user information, which is just for our information. So we'll probably want a logout button, but I'm not going to put that here. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Let's look at the login working, and then I actually want to put the logout up in the nav, not in the main page. So I wonder if I just save that, is that enough? Let's just check to see what else he's done. So okay, so another interesting thing, and this comes down to the Gatsby versus React thing. When you have environment variables, you'll notice that these are all prefixed with the word Gatsby. And that's because I want the React app to have access to all of these. Imagine if you had down here something like, I've been using Contentful, which is like a headless CMS thing. Now you can, it doesn't really matter if I spell it correctly because I'm going to delete it in a second. you can put contentful API key in, and then in Gatsby node, you can do a GraphQL query against the contentful API to pull out a list of pages that you need to render, and then you can go through the onCreate page for each of those and statically create pages based on information in a third-party database. And when I say statically create them, I actually mean that data that's in contentful gets pulled down, turned into JSON, essentially, stored in a directory within your now React app. So remember, the Gatsby app, the Gatsby build tool is basically building content for a React app. So that data then gets stored on disk, and then React renders them by pulling them into the root element and wrapping them in the layout and whatever else you do. But the data is actually compiled in. So if you make changes in your CMS, you have to rebuild your application for that information to show up. Because the end file contains variables for Gatsby and also for React, you don't want this to be available to the React app, because if it's available to the React app, then theoretically it's available to anybody who can right-click and navigate through the application. It could potentially be stored somewhere. You don't want that to get through. So what Gatsby will do is by default, it won't pass through any environment variables defined in env. It won't pass any of them through, or in fact, even in standard environment variables as well, because it would happen when you put it into production. It won't pass through any key, any values unless the key starts with Gatsby underscore. And in that case, it also becomes available to React. So that's why we've got Gatsby underscore in front of each of those. So we can close that one. What was he doing here? So yeah, going back to this, he's changed Gatsby browser, which I didn't just close. So we were providing through here direct pointers to auth0 domain. Now, in my case, I've got Gatsby underscore auth0 domain. So I could just change each of these for Gatsby underscore, which would work. His proposal, though, is quite nice in that basically he's saying, try and get auth0 domain. If that doesn't exist, then get Gatsby auth0 domain. So this now means that potentially this code could work just in a React app or in a Gatsby generated React app, if that makes sense. So I'm just going to make sure that these are all the same capitalization, spelling, underscores. So now we do auth0 domain in there, that one in there, and that one in there. So that makes it a bit more flexible around where you're running the application. That's cool. And like I say before, I could have just inserted the Gatsby underscore because for this particular application, that would always work. If you were wanting to use this as a basis for generating a tool for automatically integrating auth0 with Gatsby and or React, you'd obviously want to go for something more flexible like this. The logout URL as well, he did the same thing. So in the previous code down here, he had this logout button that just clicked on the logout link. And now he's saying, instead of just clicking on the logout link, pass in a where to return to, which will either be the logout URL or the logout URL with the Gatsby prefixed. I've got that. Come on, type properly. I've got that in here, I think. Yep, logout URL. So I'll do that in a second. And then these just added into the environment variables. So theoretically, file save all, I should now be able to start up Gatsby again, and hopefully I'll be asked to log in. Right, so this is the error that I was saying about before. Because Gatsby's running the auth0 app through Node, if I manage to find the error, where's it gone again? Blob is not defined. Whole load of, yeah, whatever stuff. So I'm going to refer to somewhere I've done this before. Let me just see if I can find it. Basically, I need to put in some code. that is going to disable the Auth0 library during build time. So Gatsby node. So what we're doing is we're basically modifying some Webpack configuration. When we create the config, we want to say if the stage is build HTML, then if there's a module being pulled in that is auth0 spar.js, you actually want to use null. This will only happen during build HTML. Now that said, I tried this and it didn't work because I needed to add in another one, develop HTML. So because I'm running Gatsby develop, it will call the develop HTML and the develop JavaScript or develop JS or something stages. When you're doing a build, it'll call build. So I wanted to do this on either. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if build HTML or develop HTML in that array, if that array includes the value of stage, so this is the array we're looking at, this is the value we're looking at, and if this array includes the value that's in stage, then we're going to set it to null. So that should fix the issue. Let's run develop again and see if that works. Sweet. All right, let's jump over to the browser again. Running URL Shortener. All right, so it's taking me to the sign-on page. I'm just going to go back to the home page again. So we'll see here we've got home and dashboard. It's not doing anything. Cool. So one thing I do notice is if we look at the dashboard, I've got protected route surrounding these, and the dashboard itself, if the path is just slash, so if you go to slash dashboard, it's going to show the dashboard component. If you go to slash dashboard slash redirect slash blah, it'll show details. If we look at the dashboard, I'm using class-based here, and one of my future steps will be to turn these into function-based components. But it returns dashboard, create redirect, and a form, and a few other things. If I click on it, it actually shows that information, but it doesn't show any of the content. I'm not sure if that's an issue yet. I don't know if it shouldn't be showing it yet. Maybe I need to look into that. But it is forcing a redirect, so that's a good start, I guess. Now, interestingly, that's a bit of a bug. The login, I'm going to have to report this back to my buddies. Let's just take a screenshot of that. Devrel. Yeah, I'm just streaming and saw this while doing a demo. Should the, what are they called? Login and sign up buttons and sign up tabs be obscured? Rolling on the floor laughing emoji. Who's the best person to report this to? All right, you all saw it here first. That's reported now. Way to mess up my stream. No, I think it shows that we're all human. Does that sound reasonable? All right, because I created this from new, this is a new tenant that I created like an hour ago or so. There shouldn't be any users yet. Yeah, scroll up. All right, no users. So I'm going to find my browser again. Oh, I was there already. I'm going to sign up with a new one. Then at decry.com. My favorite password. Actually, I should probably. This is technically going to be my production account. So I'm going to take that off screen, and I'm going to get one password to give me a secure password that I'll plonk in there. So not going to let me generate. Generate password. Use that one. Save as. I don't want to update that one. I want to create a new login. I'll bring that back now. New login. The title is URL Shortener. Sign up. All right. Yes, I'm happy to provide that information, and now I can get access to this, and I can create URLs. Now the thing is, I just clicked create, didn't I? The thing is, I can create these, but if we come into the network tab, let me create another one. So I've posted this here. If I copy as curl, for example, come here. So I want to make a call to redirects. I don't care about the user agent. Let's get rid of that. I wish there was a copy to curl except all the browser stuff. I just want to do a demo. I don't care about compressed. I don't care about the referrer. Don't care. I probably do care about the content type. It needs to be. I would argue that probably. What did I send? I sent JSON. Anyway. Origin, don't care. Connection, don't care. Data. So, very simply, I'm making the dash data will imply a post request. I'm making a post request to port 3000, and if I call that, it's been created. And now, if I refresh the dashboard, we should see spammers in there. And I didn't need to provide any authentication here. So while I've put authentication in so that the user can't see the form, I could guess or maybe intercept somebody's requests and make my own requests. So what we need to do now is secure the API. So let's go to the API, which is not that one, it's this one. Stick that in this side here. What are we going to do here? Let's stop the server for now. We don't need this one anymore. That's all done. Right. So we're going to need some modules. We're going to want Now the thing is, I've done this on an Express server before, and this is using Zeit's Now server. So what I'm going to do is presumably let's have a look at this one. If I just run, it's not going to work. Let's see if I can do Express node Express Zeit. See, there's some way I can easy to deploy serverless app. How to deploy app using Express and Heroku. No worries, Justin. Thanks for hanging around. One last meeting of the week. Yeah, I don't know how long I'll be. I was planning on finishing before 5 today. In fact, there's a couple of messages here. Let me just see what's going on. 23 minutes ago. Okay, no, that's all good. I will probably... Okay, it would probably only take me 10 minutes to do the next bit anyway if I knew how to start a node server to run this instead of using Zeit's built-in thing. So I'll probably be going for 20-25 minutes. If you jump back in that time, it would be awesome. If not, have a great weekend. And hopefully at some point this COVID shit will stop and we'll catch up in real life. Enjoy a meeting. Hope it's a good one. Hope there are beers involved. Requiring Express and all of those things I'm doing already. Let's go. Project URL redirector, URL API. And am I using Express? I don't think I am I? No, I'm thinking of my other app. These are just... Alright, let's do it another way. Instead of using Express, let's have a look at Zeit now API auth 0. How to authenticate. Don't care about the Gatsby part, but maybe this will include some information about securing the APIs. We don't have such content. The quick start we have the Zeit as well. Next.js. I'd encourage you to file as a feature request. That was just the end of last year. Maybe I need to work this out and write the blog post. Let's come in here and do a search. Developers, resources, guides, maybe? Let's try that. Auth, nothing in there at all. Let's just try Zeit.co auth. And login, that's Next.js. I just want to secure the API. I think if we jump in here, of course that's not going to work. That's not working either. Oh, I'm too tired. It's the end of a Friday. I'm going to give up. But I'll get back to this next week. But we have login working on the dashboard now. That's cool. Maybe I'll see if one of my engineering teammates can join me and they can teach me how to do it with Zeit. Or maybe I'll just rewrite the API to be Express-based. That's not the worst idea. Thanks, folks. Thanks for hanging out. It's been fun. Have a great weekend, and I'll catch you all next week. Ciao.